Ladies and gentlemen, in my last lecture, I discussed the virtue of justice and pride and productiveness. I pointed out that justice is the one specifically social virtue of the objectivist ethics, the virtue that pertains specifically to man's relationship with other men. I stated that self-interest is the only proper base and motive of human action, and that in their dealings with one another, men must neither grant sacrifices nor demand them. Among men who observe the principle of justice, men who do not grant sacrifices and who do not demand them, men who do not seek the unearned, there is no clash of interests. Such men deal with one another by voluntary consent, and only when they perceive that it is to their mutual benefit to do so. This is the only possible basis of social harmony and authentic goodwill among men. If men do attempt to gain the unearned and the undeserved, why then, of course, there are clashes of interest among them, in the sense, you might say, that there is a clash of interests between a hold-up man and his victim. If men try to live by something other than reason and the mind, if they consider destruction a practical and valid means to gain their ends, if they hold their desires outside the context of reality and justice, if they feel free to place the I wish above the it is, and to act on their irrational wishes, then nothing but clashes of interest can exist among men. Neither harmony nor goodwill is possible in a society of cannibals. There is a very important formulation or statement in Galt's speech that I want to quote in this connection. Quote, "The symbol of all relationships among rational men, the moral symbol of respect for human beings, is the trader. We who live by values, not by loot, are traders both in matter and in spirit. A trader is a man who earns what he gets and does not give or take the undeserved. A trader does not ask to be paid for his failures, nor does he ask to be loved for his flaws. A trader does not squander his body as fodder or his soul as alms. Just as he does not give his work except in trade for material values, so he does not give the values of his spirit, his love, his friendship, his esteem, except in payment and in trade for human virtues, in payment for his own selfish pleasure, which he receives from men he can respect." Unquote. If you want to understand how the concept of the trader principle applies to the spirit, and if you want to understand what is its alternative, and if you want to know whether or not that alternative is desirable, ask yourself whether you would wish to be loved selflessly. Ask yourself whether you wish to be loved by someone who gains nothing from loving you, who will tell you that he loves you not for your virtues but for your weaknesses, that his motive is not admiration but pity, that he wants to marry you only because he knows you need him, that he loves you not for any selfish pleasure he finds in your character but only out of a sense of charity and duty. If your self-esteem recoils in revulsion at such a concept of love, question the motives and the psychology of those who advocate it as a moral ideal. Two people who do advocate it are Lillian Reardon and James Taggart in Atlas Shrugged. You will remember the scene where Lillian explains to Reardon her idea of what one should offer in love. I quote, "If you tell a beautiful woman that she is beautiful, what have you given her? It's no more than a fact, and it has cost you nothing. But if you tell an ugly woman that she is beautiful, you offer her the great homage of corrupting the concept of beauty. To love a woman for her virtues is meaningless. She's earned it. It's a payment, not a gift. But to love her for her vices is a real gift, unearned and undeserved. To love her for her vices is to defile all virtue for her sake. And that is a real tribute of love, because you sacrifice your conscience, your reason, your integrity, and your invaluable self-esteem. What's love, darling, if it's not self-sacrifice? Close quote. Or remember the scene between Cheryl and James Taggart when Cheryl is coming to realize the kind of monster she has married. She asks Jim, what is it that you want to be loved for? And he cries, what a cheap shopkeeper's attitude, to be loved for. So you think that love is a matter of mathematics, of exchange, of weighing and measuring like a pound of butter on a grocery counter? I don't want to be loved for anything. I want to be loved for myself, not for anything I do or have or say or think. For myself, not for my body or mind or words or works or actions, Cheryl asks him. But then, what is yourself? And he answers, if you loved me, you wouldn't ask it. You wouldn't ask. You'd know. You'd feel it. Why do you always try to tag and label everything? Can't you rise above those petty materialistic definitions? Don't you ever feel, just feel? Close quote. Perhaps you will think that James Taggart states his position too extremely, and that no one in real life believes such things. So I shall now refer you to the writings of Dr. Erich Fromm, a prominent contemporary psychologist. In his book entitled The Art of Loving, Dr. Fromm declares that, quote, love is the only sane and satisfactory answer to the problem of human existence, unquote. But Dr. Fromm contends it is very difficult to achieve love in a capitalistic society because, quote, the principle underlying capitalistic society and the principle of love are incompatible, close quote. The principle of capitalism is that of what Fromm himself terms fairness ethics. That's a quote from Fromm. The principle of fairness ethics, of trade, of the exchange of values. Individuals deal with one another only on the premise of mutual self-interest. They engage only in those transactions from which they expect a profit or reward. But to approach love with any concern for one's self-interest is, says Fromm, to negate the very essence of love. To love an individual is to feel care and responsibility for him. It is not to appraise his character as a commodity from which one expects pleasure. To love ideally is to love unconditionally. It is to love a human being, not for the fact of what he is, but for the fact that he is. It is to love without reference to values or standards or judgment. Again quoting, in essence, all human beings are identical. We are all part of one. We are one. This being so, it should not make any difference whom we love. Close quote. It should not make any difference whether the person we love is a being of stature or a total nonentity, a genius or a fool, a hero or a scoundrel. Consistent with this view of love, since, again quoting, quote, in essence all human beings are identical, unquote, Fromm concedes a certain logic to the idea of marriages arranged between partners who have not chosen nor perhaps even met each other. It is only the, quote, paradoxical character of human nature and of erotic love, unquote, that makes him feel that such marriages are inadvisable, because, he explains, quote, erotic love requires certain specific, highly individual elements which exist between some people but not between all, close quote. Paradoxical, isn't it?